Alrighty guys, we are back. And I rotated the engine on the stand 90 degrees. That's about the only difference. And I cleaned off the lift. So today we're going to be timing the camshafts, and we're also going to be checking the valve clearances on this engine. Now this engine only has 12,000 miles on it, so crossing my fingers, and I'm hoping that I only have to set the timing once in this, because it is a little bit of a pain in the butt to actually set the timing. So here's to hoping that the valves do not need adjusted and that everything's well within spec. But yeah, we're gonna button this thing back up, and hopefully we can put this engine in the bike today. Now in the last video I said that I would start it. I don't have the carburetors cleaned and put back together, so it's not going to be a possibility. I had a couple of people several videos back actually reach out and say they had a couple carburetor related questions, so when I put the carburetors back together, hopefully I can answer some of those questions for you in that video. But I'm at least hoping to get this engine in the bike today and get the valves checked, get the engine timed, and then put it the rest of the way back together. Alright, so here the cams are out of the bike. Now the way to identify each cam is they're labeled. So you have an E here, that's the exhaust cam, and an I here, that's the intake cam. Exhaust cam goes on the exhaust side here, and the intake cam goes on the intake side here. Now the way you install these is you first install the exhaust cam, and when you install it, you want to make sure that this little dot here is facing up. Same thing when you install the intake cam, which would be after you install the exhaust cam. You just want to make sure that that little timing mark, you find it here, right here, this little timing mark is facing up. Now those timing marks are going to align with these dots here on the camshaft caps. So you got one here, then you got one there. So don't mix this stuff up when you take it apart. You know, take it apart kind of like this and keep it all together as best you can. If you do happen to get it mixed up, it's okay. They are labeled intake 1, intake 2, and exhaust 1, exhaust 2. Intake 1 will be on the side where the timing marks are. Exhaust 1 will be on the side where the timing marks are. So it's not a big deal if you get it mixed up, but if you can prevent it, prevent it. When I took this apart initially, I just left all this stuff, I put it all back intact and put the whole head as an assembly away because we weren't doing anything with the head, so none of this stuff moved. So now we're going to time it. You put the exhaust cam in first, then the intake cam, and you want to keep in mind that we're going to keep these timing marks up. So that's what I'm going to do now. The other thing is you want to take the dowel pins out of the intake side, these dowel pins that go here, and that just allows that cam to kind of roll in and sit in that channel there. So yeah, you want to remove those dowel pins first, and then you can put the intake cam in a lot easier. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to set this up, get it in, and then I'll show you guys what the timing should look like. Alright, so before we actually time the engine, we want to make sure that our engine is at top dead center, and to do that we just take the Magneto and we align the T and the hash mark with the split in the engine cases. And once that's aligned, that means the engine's at top dead center, and we can now drop the camshafts in. Keep an eye on this. It might move a little bit. Just before you set the timing, make sure that that T is still lined up. Alright, a little overhead view there. So we're going to take the exhaust cam first. I'm going to take the timing chain, and we want to pull this tight. We also want to make sure that it is engaged on the gear down below. I'm not going to be able to show that on camera. It does not pick up on camera, but you just want to look down inside the engine and make sure that your rollers are around the sprocket on the actual crankshaft down in the engine there. You'll be able to see if it is or is not with just looking down in there. I tried a couple times to pick that up on camera and it just didn't work. Alright, so slide that through the chain there, and then we want to hold the exhaust side tight because we want all the tension on the exhaust side, and we want all the slack on the intake side, because that's where the intake side is where the tensioner goes. So that'll take up any of that slack. So get this chain on there, get it as tight as you can. There we go. And make sure our dot is sticking up. There, that's good. So now that should be enough slack there on the other side so that we can get our intake cam in. The intake cam, again, we want to make sure that our timing mark is up, so that way we can slide that in. Now this is where those dowel pins being out really helps, because you can actually set this down and kind of slide that in place. Now when you time this, it's going to be pretty straightforward. I mean, you're either going to be off a tooth or not off a tooth, and it'll definitely, you'll be able to tell if you're off or not. But that looks like it is correctly timed. I'm going to grab the camera and show you, but I believe that is perfectly timed there. Wouldn't that be nice if I did it in my first shot? Alrighty, so let's go over the timing on this. So the reason we left the stator cover off is we want this timing mark here, this T, to be in line with the split in the case here, and that's pretty close there. I'd say that's pretty good. And then with that in place there, we just want these timing dots to be up, because they are going to line up with the cam caps. But make sure that those are up for now. And then all our slack is on the back side here. So if we reach through our tensioner here, we've got slack on that chain on the back side, not on the front. So as long as that's the case, which it seems to be, everything's timed here. I'm going to put these cam caps on, and then I'll show you what you want to line those up with before you actually tighten everything down. Alrighty guys, so the cams are in, and if you look, they are lined up with the dots on the cam caps there. So that looks good. Now all we have to do is finish putting our cam caps on, and then we will tighten everything down, torque it all in sequence. But we're going to just tighten these down evenly so that it puts even pressure the whole time on the camshaft. Now, some of these lobes are actually going to open valves, so that's why you're going to have a little extra resistance when you're tightening them down. And it's why you want to do it evenly, because you actually can end up breaking a camshaft if you wrench down on one side while the other side's still loose, and then you go to tighten that side down, and it actually could snap a camshaft, which is what we're trying to avoid. So I'm not using power tools, just hand tools for now to just get it snug. And it's a little tedious, a little time consuming, but you don't want to damage stuff at this point. We already have, we've come so far. So now's not the time to break anything. So this side's a little higher. We want to snug up this side a little bit more. Now I'm going to go through and I'm going to torque everything down. Alright, so 87 inch-pounds is what the torque spec is. I'm just going to work my way around here. I'm not going to do these in steps. I'm just going to go right to it. Alrighty, so we're going to install the timing chain tensioner. I'm going to make sure that that up is facing up. Up is toward the top of the engine. And then we can install this spring and bolt after we have the tensioner in. So I'm just going to grab the bolts and put that in. It's pretty straightforward. Just the 2 bolts through there on the back side of the engine. Lock it over there. And that's it. So just tighten that down, and then we'll put our bolt and spring in there. Pretty straightforward. Alrighty, so when you're putting this tensioner in, it doesn't really say to do this in the book, but I recommend doing this. I would turn it the direction that it turns over, which is counterclockwise, while you're putting this tensioner spring in. And what that'll do is put all the tension on the exhaust side of the engine, and then it'll slacken the intake side of the engine. So you just have to put a little bit of tension there, and then that'll take up all the slack on that side. It'll take up the slack in between the cams, and it'll put all the slack on the actual side where it should be. And that'll prevent that from jumping timing. So as you're installing that spring in there, spring's going to be under quite a bit of tension. You just want to push in on that, thread that in at the same time. Catches a couple threads. That's good. Then we'll just tighten that down all the way. And then this gets torqued to 168 inch-pounds or 14 foot-pounds. So, get out our handy-dandy torque wrench. 168. And that's it. That's all she wrote. So now we'll go back up. We'll recheck the timing. And the timing is on just like it should be. As long as that's the case, now we're ready to check the valves. And hopefully, like I said, I don't have to do this again because it is a bit time consuming and tedious. And I really would prefer not to do this again. To check the valves, I think the intake is, let me get a look. Intake is between 4 and 8 thousandths. So we're just going to put the 8 thousandths in there, and if it doesn't go, then that means it's not too loose. 8 in there, doesn't go. So then we'll put the 4 thousandths in there.
Well, actually, you're probing that.
So 3 thousandths goes in there. All right, well, as long as 8 doesn't go, then we are good to go. So that's good. And then the exhaust is 8 to 12 thousandths. So all I really have to do is make sure that 12 thousandths doesn't go. But I also have to make sure that 8 thousandths does. As long as 8 thousandths does and 12 thousandths doesn't, that means it falls within the spec. I don't have to go any further than that.
It's a pass-fail test.
Basically. Not. Joel, can I tell you how relieved I am that I didn't have to retime this engine? That's a win in my book. Hopefully you guys doing this at your house are that lucky and you don't have to go through with taking this all back apart and readjusting everything. But valves are in spec. We're just going to button this back up and throw it back in the engine. Alright, so just take a little bit of the Yama Bond or whatever silicone gasket sealer you're using and just put a couple dabs on the sharp edges of the cylinder head there. Make sure you get your gasket seated inside the valve cover, and you just want to delicately install the valve cover onto the cylinder head there, making sure that none of the gasket actually falls out of place. So after you get it set on there, you just want to look around and make sure that the gasket isn't poking out in any location or it didn't actually fall inside the cylinder head. So I'm showing you this because this is how much you should look at this. Look at it in great detail. Make sure that everything is seated properly, because this is a pain to replace or to fix when it's inside the motorcycle. So take a little extra time, make sure that you have it set up right, and then once you know you have it set up right, then it's time to torque the old bolts down. Alright, so now the Magneto cover goes on, and this is dry inside here, so you just basically put this on. And be careful when you put this on. It's going to want to pinch your fingers because that magnet's going to pull in on it. Got to put this in through here, like that. There we go. That should be better. Now it should work just fine. It's going to pinch my fingers is what's going to happen. Perfect. Just like that. Yeah, no gasket with this one because I guess it's sealed from the engine side and they don't really think it's going to get messy in there, so whatever. 104 inch-pounds. Or 8.7 foot-pounds. Either way, it's not a lot. Alrighty, so the engine is all back together. Well, it's back together enough that I can put this back in the bike. I took it apart with carburetors. I can't remember. I think I had the carburetors on when I took it apart. We're going to put it together with them off. It's just going to make it easier to get the bike in, get the bike in. It's just going to make it easier to get the engine back in the bike. The less stuff that's on it, the easier it's going to be to just kind of shimmy it back into the bike. Now there's going to be some things, now brackets, stuff like that, as you put this in the bike, you're going to see where maybe you routed something a little bit incorrectly, a wire or otherwise, but you won't really see that until we actually put it into the motorcycle. So that's the next thing that we're going to do is grab the bike, and we're going to put this bad boy back in the motorcycle, and hopefully we have an engine back in the frame, and then I'll be happy with that. But there it is. Engine's all back together. I'm only going to do a couple things. I'm going to put some spark plugs in. While the camera was off, I ended up putting the starter motor on. I attached some of these hoses, and I just did minor little things, so nothing crazy. But I just wanted to get that stuff buttoned up so it wasn't sitting around. But no, it's ready to go back in, so that's what we're going to do next is clean off this lift and go grab the motorcycle. Oh man, there's a layer of dust on this thing. It's been a minute. It has definitely been a minute. I almost forgot what this thing looked like, Joel.
Well, this is a good reminder for you.
This does serve as a good reminder as to what it looked like. It was easy to find. It was the bike without the engine in it.
That helps to narrow it down.
Ta-da!
Yeah.
Here she is. I just got to put this engine in this bike. Alrighty, engine is back in the bike, and there was so much less headache this time. Huge thank you to Jolie Moley for his help.
That's what we do.
When she's back in, I got a couple bolts in just to hold it in place. Now begins that long process of making sure I route everything correctly. So the engine's in, it's bolted somewhat. The problem is, if you notice, I'm in a different location than when I started this project, and because of that, I'm missing about half of the things I need to put this bike together completely. So I'm pretty much at a stopping point here. I have to go to my house, get all the parts, and then I'll be able to put this thing together. So this is just going to be a quick short little video, guys. The engine is done, it's complete, it is in the bike, so that is a huge step in terms of getting this project completed. But that is going to do it, at least for this video here. I'm going to see what little items I can put together with the parts I do have, but the major stuff like carburetors I don't have the parts that go underneath the airbox that mount the ignition coils, so I don't have a lot of little odds and ends that hold up this job. But that is going to do it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for checking this out. If you like following along to this Thundercat project, just leave a comment below. If there's anything I left out that you'd like to see, I do have another one of these bikes, and it also needs second gear replaced. So put those comments in the comment section below, and you know, when I take that engine apart, I can go into more detail, you know, as per what you guys want to see. But we'll see you in the next video when I can actually put this thing all together. So stay tuned.